Welcome in, my friends. You've read the title of the video, you know what time it is. I got to play Elden Ring Nightreign for an entire day, and it was glorious! And I also have the awesome bragging right of being able to say that I was a member of the first team to beat the Nightlord in our play session. And it was every bit as intense, thrilling, and heart-pounding as you'd hope it would be. So without further ado, as I so faithfully did for the Shadow of the Erdtree preview, let me give you my full and honest recount and overview of my time with Elden Ring Nightreign. And make sure you stick around to the end of the video for more exclusive details and information such as the release date and collector's edition. I have been as thorough as is physically possible for you, but if I have missed any information that you would love to know, join my Discord server, link down below, and just ask me in there. I'm always up for a chat and I will answer all questions that I possibly can. We'll start by talking about the main gameplay loop of the game before doing a deep dive into every area. As always, chapters have been provided for convenience, and make sure you are subscribed to Dom's Roundtable with the notifications on, because there is plenty of Nightreign content coming soon. So let's start by talking about the main gameplay loop and what to expect when you load up Nightreign and jump into your first match. You begin with you and your two teammates doing an epic cinematic walk towards the edge of a massive mountain, before throwing yourselves off towards the heart of Limveld, a new, never-before-seen area of the Lands Between, blending elements of Limgrave along with other areas. Then you are promptly swooped up by your spectral hawk, and you now begin your descent into the beautiful chaos that is Nightreign. You must now work together to become as strong as possible in preparation to fight the first night boss. Days will last around 15 to 20 minutes, and during this time you will want to scour the land for chests, mini-bosses, camps, underground labyrinths, churches of Marika, castles, anything and anywhere that may hold valuable loot, runes, weapons, and upgrades to help prepare yourself for the challenges ahead. And I will deep dive into every single thing I have just mentioned in their own segments later on in the video. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, we haven't even finished day one yet. I will mention that during the playtest, this is very, very important. We were playing on the PS5, and though the game has an easy-to-use ping system, in the heat of such fast-paced action, it can be easy to miss your teammates' pings. So we were all hooked up on comms, and we were very much advised to use voice communication to get the job done. And this, I believe, is so crucial. For that reason, I want to remind you that I have a Dom's Roundtable Discord server for basically this very reason. We have nearly 10,000 Nightfarers already waiting to drop into Nightreign and help each other complete the tough challenges ahead. So get yourself in the Roundtable, the link is below both in the description and the pinned comments, and hopefully along with interacting with other members of the community and helping each other out, we can drop in together sometime, because I always play with my community, and you may even feature in a future video if you would like to. Now, back to the gameplay loop. You've leveled up, you've upgraded your weapon, the Ring of Fire is closing in, and the first night will soon be upon you. The Ring of Fire will close on a random location each game, and once it is at its smallest, you are now trapped in this location, and the first night boss will spawn shortly. Prepare for a tough fight, and if you do make it through, the Ring of Fire will now have completely receded, giving you free reign over the entire map once again, allowing you to reach areas you may have missed the first time around, and giving you another 15 to 20 minutes to repeat the cycle and become as powerful as possible, preparing for the Night 2 boss, which I assure you is infinitely harder than the first night. And just as you are approaching the Night 1 or the Night 2 boss respectively, a wave of enemies will spawn that you have to defeat first. They will always be related to the boss you're about to fight, so when you become more familiar with the game, you'll know what boss to prepare for. And also note that you don't get a Site of Grace conveniently located in the ring, so you'll need to make sure that you have healed up and are as prepared as possible before that ring locks you into the arena with the boss. Now, if you do manage to defeat both bosses, there is no third day. You will now have opened the Spirit Shelter, and you will traverse through this portal and be greeted by one final sight of grace before you must then steel yourselves and prepare to face the Nightlord. There are 8 different Nightlords in the game at launch, and you will choose which one you face on the target screen at the Roundtable Hold. But we shall talk about the Roundtable and the Nightlords later on in their individual sections. The final part of the main gameplay loop is either victory or death, both of which will end with the spoils that you have earned from battles won and trials overcome. This will in turn reward you with relics and merc, a brand new currency used to purchase many items. These are the primary 2 new Roguelite Mechanics, and again, they will get their own section later on in the video. For now, however, you now know how a 45-minute or so match of Nightreign looks. Now let's start to focus down into the specifics of each section and look at some of the 8 Nightfarers on offer for you to play. During the playtest, we were able to play as 4 of the 8 Nightfarers that will be available at launch, and they all play extremely differently from one another. So I truly believe that even though you can't technically completely customize a brand new original character from the ground up, that there will be something for everyone, and at least one of these archetypes will really speak to you and you will fall in love with them. The Guardian, for instance, was my absolute favourite of the 4 that we got our hands on, so let me talk you through them now and also share with you the key differences that make each Nightfarer so unique. So there are 4 key differences with each character: their character skill, the ultimate art, their passive ability, and their movement. All 4 of these things are very different from character to character. So let me start by giving you a few examples. The Guardian, for instance, is very much a tank. A character with high defensive capabilities who can use a shield to withstand even the most ferocious of enemy attacks. He has a pretty lackluster dodge. He just kind of jerks forward. Very few iframes, very hard to dodge many enemy attacks with it. But he is a tank, and his passive ability more than makes up for his movement. His passive ability is High Guard, and whilst guarding with a shield, you can actually move to transition into an even more powerful version of the regular guard stance, which can be maintained until you are poise broken. This allows you to just eat enemies' attacks like they are nothing and gives your allies lots and lots of time to do what they do best. The Guardian's character skill is Whirlwind. Exactly as it sounds, this will summon a swirling wind around you, dealing light damage to enemies and even knocking smaller enemies up in the air and on their asses. And the Guardian's ultimate art is the Wings of Salvation. You jump high into the air and perform a rapid dive attack. You can then even use this again in mid-air by pressing the strong attack button to deploy a defensive barrier around yourself. I had so much fun with this guy. I thought he was freaking awesome. Now, before I share with you one of the other archetypes, let me give you some more information on Nightfarers. Another really good thing to know going into this game is that multiple people can play as the same Nightfarer, so you never need to worry, unlike with Space Marine 2, that someone's going to take your class and then you're both going to be standing there stubbornly looking at each other like, you change, no, you change. If you both enjoy the same favorite class, both play as it. That is something you can do. That is absolutely fine. However, another piece of vital information is that all classes are so valuable, and synergy is much more important than just playing the strongest class. So we found during the playtest of the 4 classes on offer, the Duchess had the highest damage potential because she is very much a melee assassin glass cannon type character. So we thought, well, if she can absolutely melt enemies, let's all 3 of us just run the Duchess and just destroy everything. Didn't work. You did not have the survivability, you didn't have the support options, you didn't have the defensive capabilities. So actually just having 3 of the quote-unquote strongest class isn't the best thing to do. And having variety and getting good at multiple classes and having a team where you can build up these synergies with is going to be so key to overcoming all of the challenges and all of the different Night Lords. So next up, as I've just been talking about her, let's look at the Duchess. She, as I say, is skilled in evasion, and she's the assassin. She can dart around the battlefield very quickly, and she actually has a multiple quick consecutive dodge ability, which is really cool and quite akin to Bloodborne, but even faster. Her character skill is called Restage, and this will control time to repeat the same last amount of damage dealt to nearby enemies, and this will even replicate your allies' attacks. So if an ally has just done a crazy powerful combo, or they've just dropped their ultimate art and done like 500 damage to everything around them, you then pop your Restage skill and it will do that damage again instantly. It can be so crazy good if you're working together as a team and if you have them synergies and that cooperation and coordination. And finally, for the Duchess's ultimate art, this is Finale. You and your nearby allies become invisible to enemies for a limited time. Enemies will still mindlessly swing, and I believe they will try and swing at your last known location. So enemies with big AoE attacks, this isn't quite as effective, but against certain bosses, this was crazy powerful. They just couldn't do anything about it, and you would just wail on them until you became visible again. Next up, and I think the favorite of most people, was the Wilder. This is very much the knight of the franchise. He's well balanced and easy to handle. He starts with a sword and a shield, and he has the standard Elden Ring dodge roll. He looks like a very bog standard character, but oh, he has so many cool bells and whistles. So firstly, his passive ability is Sixth Sense, and when attacked by an enemy, you will automatically evade their first attack. This obviously has a slight cooldown, because otherwise you would just perpetually evade every single attack. So I think it's just like the first attack from each enemy, or something like that. I can't remember the specifics. Next up, the character skill is Claw Shot. You will throw a grappling hook at your enemy. When hitting a light enemy, you will pull the enemy towards you. And when hitting a heavy enemy or terrain, because you can use this as a movement ability as well, you will pull yourself towards the anchor point. And finally, the ultimate art of the Wilder is Onslaught Stake. You launch a steel stake with an explosion to deliver a powerful strike. This can be used in mid-air, and it can be charged to increase its power. This is crazy good at staggering, and if you fully charge it and you're not interrupted, it will nearly one-shot stagger even most bosses. And before we move on to the final of the 4 archetypes that we played at the playtest, I would just like you to know, even though all of these classes sound ridiculously overpowered, you cannot fathom the difficulty increase of the game itself, and it feels really, really well tuned and balanced. And as far as I'm aware, we weren't even playing the absolute perfected finished version of the game, so there are probably still tweaks going on after what we played, after the playtest, and they're probably going to analyze what might be slightly OP, what might be slightly underpowered. This is purely speculation on my part, but I just want you to know the game isn't too easy, but the game also isn't too hard. From what I've played so far, the balance, it really hit that sweet spot. And now let's look at the Recluse. She was very underutilized because she is very, very tough to use. But when you understand her, she's insanely cool. So she was the only magic user we had. I'm sure, though, 1 or 2 of the other archetypes will also be magic users. That's not to say that certain characters can't use magic. In fact, if you find a staff or a seal that you like, then every single character can use it. It's just that they'll be weaker and have less FP than the dedicated spellcasters, because of how level ups work and how they are tailored to your class's strengths. Her dodge was more of a glide along the battlefield. It was nearly as useless as the Guardian's, but you would expect that being a mage. She doesn't have particularly strong physical combat abilities. Her passive ability, Elemental Defense, will allow you to see elemental marks appearing on enemies. So when an enemy is hit by a magic, fire, lightning, or holy attack, an elemental mark will appear on them, and you can collect this mark with your skills to restore your FP, so that you pretty much never ever run out of mana. And your character skill, Magic Cocktail, will use these marks to unleash very powerful spells. So as I say, you collect marks from enemies hit by one of 4 elemental types. You can even collect the marks from your allies, which is really cool, because you are then consistently replenishing your FP and you pretty much never run out of mana. And then once you have collected 3 attribute marks, you then unleash Magic Cocktail to do various different hybrid magic based effects. And the more different types of attributes combined, the more powerful the attack will be. And there are some crazy cool combinations. And finally, the ultimate art for the Recluse is Soul Blood Song. This will apply a mark to all nearby enemies, which means whenever you or either of your allies hit the enemy, you will automatically restore HP and FP for a limited time. This is very powerful. I appreciate the character archetype section has lasted for a while, so let's move on to the combat and some other new gameplay mechanics. As you will more than likely have already seen from the first trailer, Elden Ring Nightreign introduces parkour to the franchise and allows you to move as swiftly as Sekiro. There is a heavy focus on fast-paced gameplay with a wide range of actions, and parkour is one of the key components of gameplay, including double jumping and grappling up walls, and even climbing over obstacles. We do say goodbye to Torrent in Nightreign, but your characters run at the speed of light. You effectively run as quick as you do when riding Torrent in the original Elden Ring, which allows you to traverse Limveld very fast, which, as you get to play the game, you'll realize is a necessity. And I realize I've talked about skills quite a lot, but I haven't told you actually how to use them. So just like how you would hold triangle on the controller and then press L1 or R1 to two-hand your weapon, same thing, but with L2 and R2 to use your character skill and your ultimate. And you don't need to use these particularly sparingly. Skills replenish very quickly. Certain characters far quicker than others. The Duchess, for instance, her restage character skill you can pretty much use every 10 seconds or so. Absolutely awesome. Also, another important feature of combat is equip load is not a thing. Every character has a set move speed. You won't be getting armor. They have set armor sets, set move speeds, and set equip loads to make sure that they are staying within that archetype and accurately fulfilling the role that they are designed to fulfill. Weapons, however, play an even more important role than they did in the base game. You can still hold up to 3 weapons in each hand, and even weapons that are not currently equipped in either of your hands will still apply passive buffs to your character. So ideally, by the end of Night 2, all 3 of you want to have 6 weapons equipped, because you want to be gaining all of the passive buffs from all of these weapons. And they could be a number of things. So even if you're playing as the Guardian, and you are never ever planning on casting a spell, you might still want to pick up a staff that you find, because it might give you an extra 10% two-handed bonus damage. And as we are talking about these super powerful weapon passives, an exclusive screenshot that's been provided to me is these glint blade swords. This is actually one of the weapon passives. As far as I'm aware, it can be found on any weapon in the game, and you will periodically, automatically, and for free spawn a bunch of glint blade swords. So as you can tell already just from these few examples provided, there are some really powerful passives tied to the weapons in Nightreign. The buffs are so varied. They could be passive health regen, As I say, they could be bonus damage, they could be bonus resistances, they could be passive Scarlet Rot. There are some crazy cool buff combinations that will completely change up your build on the fly. And this is one of the many features that ensures that no two runs will ever be the same. Also, another thing that was fantastic for me to hear is there is no fall damage. I think over half of my deaths in Elden Ring, and all of the Souls games to be fair, have probably come from falling. And there is no fall damage in this game. You can jump off any mountain you wish and you will be absolutely fine. It is fantastic. I love it so much. Also, as far as I'm aware, every single weapon from Elden Ring will be in the game, and I personally didn't see any new weapons, but that doesn't mean they won't be in the game. However, I'll tell you what is in the game: a bunch of new skills. Along with the character skills and ultimates I have already spoken about, there are a bunch of new actions and skills and spells that your Nightfarers can use and perform. And not only your characters, the enemies as well. So I'll give you one example. One of the night bosses, which I'll elaborate on later on, consisted partly of a demi-human queen, and she threw her staff at my head, and then it started spinning around. It sounds so ridiculous to say out loud. It was really cool and very surprising to see. So you will encounter many enemies you have seen before, but don't think that they are just copy-pasted and repurposed for a different game. Oh no, they have completely new movesets and skills, and it is very daunting at first and really cool to experience. Another new mechanic that is so important and crucial, especially when you are working together well, is that now when an enemy is being backstabbed or riposted or critical hit by a teammate, they are no longer immune to all other attacks whilst they are locked into that animation. In fact, it's quite the opposite, and your teammates are advised to keep wailing on them and doing damage during this whole animation. At least I'm praying that wasn't just a feature of the playtest and that will make it into the final game, because I love this change. And finally, for the combat section, I wanted to share with you how loot works. If you go and clear out a camp and you open up a couple of chests and they drop a few new swords, if one of you picks up that sword, it won't be available for the others. That is a singular piece of loot, and the first person that grabs it, they're the person that gets it. This is a really good reason to be on comms and to learn to trust and rely on the people you play with. You don't want to be with some random loot hoarder who's going to grab everything if it doesn't benefit them. However, don't worry if this mechanic doesn't fill you with joy, because other loot works very differently. For instance, if you kill a mini-boss or a boss, they will drop this floating orb. And when you interact with the orb, it will give you 3 choices. And you can pick one of the 3 choices as your reward for killing that boss. And all 3 players will be given 3 completely different choices. So if you pick the Knight Rider's Glaive or the plus 10% additional health, that will not be removed for a different player. In actuality, they probably have completely different loot tables. All 3 of your selections are entirely separate and are exclusive to you, to make sure that everyone is rewarded for every single big encounter, such as bosses, mini-bosses, and even rare special chests. Now let's talk about other gameplay features that are non-combat specific. Some of these are returning features that have been tweaked, but most of them are completely brand new mechanics. So firstly, for the things that are in Elden Ring that are also in Nightreign, you do, as I alluded to earlier, still have Sites of Grace, and you still rest at a Site of Grace to level up. However, you don't need to rest at a Site of Grace to regain your health, you just need to be within the vicinity of it. This is all in an effort to save time and help you be as quick as possible to make sure you are maximizing your time. And also, if you do decide to rest so you can level up, you don't need to faff about with figuring out, oh, do I want to level my strength? Do I want to level my mind? Oh, what do I do? What do I want to spec into? You just level from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 to level 4, etc, etc. And depending on the Nightfarer you have chosen, their stats will level accordingly. So the Guardian will get more endurance and more health, whereas the Recluse will get more int and more mind. And as you hit certain level thresholds, you will be able to use more and more powerful weapons. So at level 9, you can now use epic weapons. So sometimes you will find a weapon that you're very familiar with, like the Bloodhound Fang, but it won't be the regular +0 Bloodhound Fang. It will be a purple weapon. This is an epic weapon, not usable until level 9, but far more powerful. So leveling up is perhaps even more important in Nightreign than it was in Elden Ring and Shadow of the Erdtree. And for this reason, you want to make sure you are working together as a group, you are killing as many enemies and bosses as possible, and you are gathering many, many runes so you can level up as much as possible before fighting the night boss. Another returning feature is healing flasks, and you will see ruined churches of Marika around the map. Each of these contain one additional charge for your healing flask, and this can be collected by all 3 players. So if one of you picks it up, it won't give it to everyone, but it also won't remove the item. This is just to ensure the game doesn't become too easy by allowing you to split up, go to 3 separate churches, and suddenly all have doubled your healing flasks. You all need to go to each church manually if you would like additional healing. So it is up to you how confident you are in your own abilities. Do you want to farm a bit longer? Do you want to go and try and find a new weapon? Or do you feel like that additional healing flask will be really important to you? And making these on-the-fly split-second decisions are really at the core of Nightreign. The more you play and the more comfortable you get with the game, you start to run with your team like a well-oiled machine. By the end of our 8 hours with the game, it was so cool listening to the call-outs we were making with each other. Like, right, I'm just going to go grab a flask from the church. Do you want to go and solo the hippo boss? Because if one of you takes a boss out by yourself, you all get rewarded for it. You will all get the runes, and you can all go back to where the boss was and interact with the orb to get the loot. So if you're confident and comfortable enough to do this, you can split up and achieve multiple objectives at once. So it's like, okay, I'm a squishier character, I'm going to go grab a flask, you two clear that camp out, get yourself some loot, we'll meet back up at the spectral tree, we'll jump on the hawk, and we'll fly down to the castle. It's, oh, honestly, talking about it now makes me want to go back and play it this instant. It is just, it's so much fun when you make call-outs like that with your team, and you get to that point in the game where you can do stuff like that. And finally, for returning features that were in Elden Ring that have been slightly tweaked for Nightreign, is merchants and the smithing anvil. So merchants are in this game. They are spectral merchants. I'm assuming, based on the state of Roundtable Hold, that they all probably died long ago, maybe because of the Night Lords. And if you do happen to find a merchant, you can purchase all manner of consumables, cracked tears, and even smithing stones. If you're lucky, you can find smithing stones for free, but if you're unlucky, you can buy the more common smithing stones from the merchants. Then you can walk just a couple of feet away to the anvil and start to level up your weapons. And just like leveling up your character, this is very important. You are going to want to level up your weapons to have the damage output that you need to take down the late game bosses. Now let's talk about the rest of the new features that I got to experience that weren't in Elden Ring. I've got to start with this one because it's so damn cool. Randomized events. These can happen anytime, anywhere, and they are very varied. We played on a limited build of the game because obviously they didn't want to give away all of the secrets of Nightreign immediately. That's why we only had 1 of the 8 Night Lords, we only had 4 of the 8 Nightfarers, and we couldn't upgrade legendary weapons, along with a few other things, and I totally respect that decision. That is not a negative, just information I'm giving you. I love that we haven't already experienced everything, so there's still probably a good like 70 or 80% of the game that I have no idea about yet, and I'm just as excited to find out about it as you are. So, sorry, tangent over, randomized events. So there was only one that I got to experience, but I know there's loads. And in this randomized event, the sky darkened and you heard this laughter, this ominous laughter all around you. And then one member of your team got a blood mark on them. And then down comes the Fellowman. And if you are his mark, good luck. If you manage to kill him, from what I could tell, you will actually stave off the night. You will buy yourself additional time. You will get loads of runes for defeating him and an additional boss reward. But if he kills the character he is there to kill, then he goes away and it's game over for that event. So the other two players need to be close by and they need to protect the target and try their best to take down the Fellowman. Now, if you do die, I'll talk about what happens later on. I've got a whole section on dying because very many different things happen depending on the circumstances of the death. But let's wrap up the new mechanics and features first. Another thing I probably should have said ages ago is the whole map is available to you as soon as you drop. Super interactive. As I say, you can drop pings, you can zoom in and out. It's very quick and easy to maneuver around it. The map is your best friend. Like, I was frequently running around with the mini map open, zoomed in, expanded on the bottom right corner of the screen whilst I was running to the next destination. Eventually you'll learn to juggle the two and be able to do your maneuvering and your parkour whilst simultaneously looking at the zoomed in mini map, so you know what your next target is. It's a really intuitive feature, and you will definitely become very accustomed to using the map frequently and fast. As you can see on the table here, you will also occasionally stumble upon these maps that you can interact with, and they will reveal various details that you can then see marked automatically for you on your minimap. This could be things like the locations of bosses, the locations of hidden loot, or even the locations of talisman scarabs. So if you happen to see rooms that look like this, make sure you go check them out and see if they have one of these maps to interact with. Next up, as I say, you've got parkour as well. Parkour is really fun. You have spectral trees that can be interacted with to summon your spectral hawk. The spectral hawk will follow a set route depending on the tree you have summoned him to, but you can kind of push him and veer him off course, and you can also drop off at any time, so you don't need to worry that you're locked in and you're going to overshoot your mark. The very first event, as soon as you spawn in, that is a set route and you'll be dropped off at a specific point. But if you use the spectral trees, you can jump off pretty much wherever you want, and you can use this to get around the map very quickly. And finally, we have a new version of the Spirit Springs called the Spirit Stream. This works literally the exact same way as the Spirit Spring, except for the fact that you can obviously use it without the need for torrent. That's most of the in-match mechanics talked about. Definitely all of the main ones that I got to experience. So now I'm going to talk to you about some of the out-of-match mechanics, such as the relics and the new Merc currency. Then we'll also talk about Roundtable Hold itself, along with the bosses and what happens when you die. As I mentioned at the start of the video, Roundtable Hold is where you will start a match. This is where you will queue for the matchmaking, you will choose which Nightlord you want to target, and you will do a few other actions here as well. Nightreign uses a very similar multiplayer password system to Elden Ring. So again, if you would like to play with members of Dom's Roundtable's community, then make sure one of your multiplayer passwords is Knights, all in caps. However, if you do want to leave all of your multiplayer passwords blank, that is completely fine, obviously, and it will just queue you with pretty much anyone that is queuing. Or alternatively, as I say, you can jump in my Discord, you can group up with your pre-made trio, you can determine a password there and then that the three of you want to use, and that will ensure that the three of you are queued together in a party in the same lobby. So if you are in a pre-made trio, you might want to just use some random password specific to you that you determine at the start of your match, to make sure that you are definitely going to get matched together. Alternatively, something else that not many people know about, and a lot of people were upset about this because there was some confusion, you can queue as a duo. If you only have one other friend you would like to play with, you can totally do that. Just use the same password system and just queue together, and you'll be allocated one other random player to play with you. Obviously, the synergy with the third player won't be quite as good, but you still have the ping system, you still have each other, and it's still a completely viable way of playing. As for the other things you can do in Roundtable Hold, you can speak to all 8 of the Nightfarers, and as far as I'm aware, there is lore and story tied to each of the Nightfarers. But we didn't delve into this, so I'm equally as excited as you to find out more about them, and if there is any specific story beats that you can perform whilst playing as each of these different characters. In fact, there is quite a lot of Roundtable Hold that I imagine most of us didn't explore because we just wanted to play as much of the game as possible. One thing we weren't able to do is spend our merc at the shop. That feature wasn't available in the playtest, so I don't know specifically what you will be able to buy with merc, but I imagine relics will be involved, and I'll talk about relics in literally just a few seconds on the next section. However, just to wrap up the Roundtable Hold section, another thing you can do, which I think is brilliant, is you can review all of the skills, all of the abilities, all of the passives of every single Nightfarer. So if you ever forget exactly what your Nightfarer does, you can come here without the stress of being in a match, and you can fully read and digest everything that your Nightfarer has to offer. For instance, because we were all doing so much so quickly at the playtest, I imagine by the end most people forgot that the Wilder's Onslaught stake attack could actually be charged to increase its power. At least I know that's something I forgot. So being able to go and review all of this information whenever you want is another really cool feature. Now that you know some of what you can do at Roundtable Hold, let's talk about 2 of the primary roguelite mechanics, relics and merc. Firstly, you've probably noticed I have very specifically been saying roguelite throughout the whole entire video. This is by no means a roguelike, it's not trying to be one, and that's not how you should view it. But it does have a small spattering of roguelite mechanics, in that every time you complete a match, whether you win or lose, you will earn a few relics, you will earn some merc, and you can use this to power your characters up and have a slightly easier time during your next run. So one thing I really want to talk to you about, which I have not touched on at all yet, is relics. Relics are probably the most fun thing for me about this game, because they really allow you to make a proper build for your character, and I just adore builds. So some relics can be class specific, and they are all color coded. So for example, initially the Guardian will have 2 red relic slots and 1 yellow relic slot, and red slots are more for increasing your defensive capabilities, maybe increasing your maximum endurance or your guard counter damage, things like this, whereas yellow is more of an offensive slot and will have more generic buffs which apply to all classes because some classes share relic colors. You also gain different rarities of relics depending on how well you did. So if you do manage to go all the way through and you do manage to beat the Nightlord, you're pretty much guaranteed 1 or 2 grand relics, which will have 3 different buffs on them. However, delicate relics only have 1 and polished relics have 2. And their benefits are wild, and they vary so much that it can completely change up your character. So one thing I unlocked early on for the Guardian was all of my weapons have inherent Scarlet Rot buildup. And yes, that is as sick as it sounds. I was like, okay, let's find me a weapon that has some decent speed and some decent status effect buildup and just spam Scarlet Rot on everything in sight. It's really damn cool. A few other options for buffs which relics can grant your various characters will be increased HP restoration, increased levels of stamina, improved strength, dex, and int, and even the ability to mark treasure on your map. And one thing I'm going to hazard a guess at is that you will be able to spend Merc to re-trait your relics. That is purely speculation, but when you see what the UI for the relics looks like, that felt to me like quite a natural thing to be able to do, so that when you really want to hone and perfect a character, you can spend some of your Merc to re-roll the traits on your favorite relics and make them even better. Another thing I'm praying you can do with Merc, though From aren't usually known for this, is buying cosmetics. Because of the fact that we do know that enemies from other lands have been pushed together into the lands between, and we will be fighting the likes of the Nameless King and the Centipede Demon and various other enemies and bosses from various other games, it would be so damn cool if you could spend Merc to purchase cosmetics for your characters. My favorite thing in the world would be if your Duchess could dress up as Lady Maria. Just, oh, it would be incredible. I don't think cosmetics is a thing that's coming, but God, I hope I'm wrong. Please let me be wrong. Now let's talk about dying. There are so many different forms of death in this game, and we hadn't fully figured out how it worked by the end of the playtest, but I will give you as full of a recount as I possibly can. So firstly, each time you go down, you're not dead. You're crawling around on the ground and you have a little purple bar appear above your head. And if your allies come and hit you, that purple bar will reduce, and once it's gone, you will be revived again. If you go down again in the same fight, you will now have 2 purple bars, so it will take twice as long to revive you. And if you go down a third time, 3 purple bars. However, as far as I'm aware, once the fight is over, you are then reset back to just the 1. So whether it's a group of enemies or a boss, as long as you haven't perma-died, then your purple bars will reset back to just the 1, and that's as far as it goes. However, another thing you want to bear in mind is that there is a timer to get your teammates back up again. And whilst you are not actively trying to revive them, there will be a timer going down on that character. And if that timer fully depletes, then the character dies, and they will respawn shortly, having lost a level. Now, everything I have just told you applies when fighting regular enemies. When you're fighting the night bosses, now this is a whole different can of worms. The good news is you no longer have this time limit to get your allies back up again, and they can crawl and move around whilst they're down, so they can slowly crawl towards you until they're in a better position to be able to get them back up again. The bad news, however, is unlike when you're fighting regular enemies, if you all die, you just respawn, that's fine, you just lose a level. If you all die when fighting one of these main bosses, it's game over. You're dead forever, you end the run. You do still gain your Merc and your relics, but it's going to be far reduced if you didn't manage to progress very far. So from what I understand, they're the 2 different variations of dying, depending on whether you're fighting random enemies out in the world or an end of night boss. And also, obviously, depending on how many of you die. If you just manage to keep reviving each other, then great, but it takes a long time and bosses are very aggressive. So now, finally, let me give you a little bit of insight into some of the bosses, and then some more key information that you should know about the release of Nightreign. As I've already mentioned, there are 8 Nightlords that you can fight, and we only fought one of them during the playtest. And this was Gladius, the Beast of Night, the Cerberus-looking dude who can split himself into 3 separate giant hellhounds. Absolutely incredible boss, awesome arena, just such a great end fight. And if all of the other Nightlords hold up even remotely, this is going to be just one of the most epic games I have ever played. The bosses we fought against were absolutely insanely cool. So there was a demi-human queen, demi-human swordsman duo boss fight. There was a souped up version of Morgott, like a Fellowman boss fight. There was a souped up Draconic Tree Sentinel, along with 2 Royal Knights at his side, and these were super powered Royal Knights. It was effectively a trio boss, this one. As you already know from the trailers, you've also got the Centipede Demon in the game. The variety of bosses and all of the new moves that they all have is a sight to behold. It's really, really cool. You will go into some of these bosses overconfident, and you'll be like, oh yeah, I know how to dodge all of Morgott's attacks. You're not fighting Morgott, my friend. You are fighting a souped up version of a Fellowman with many never before seen moves, and he is probably going to obliterate you the first few times you fight him. And that goes for every single boss in this game. Prepare to unlearn all of the movesets you've previously learned, and get ready to feel like a scrub lord again. And a few other key things you should know about Nightreign before you jump into it. Hopefully, fingers crossed, you got access to the playtest in a couple of days, and I'll be able to play with you in my Discord server. But regardless, a few more important things are that the pre-orders will include a collector's edition, which looks really fucking cool. And I can now also confirm for you that the release date is May 30th, so only just over 3 months to wait, which is around the same time we had to wait from the Elden Ring network test to the official release of Elden Ring. The game itself was created by the battle director for Elden Ring, hence the heavy focus on combat and the fact that it has been fleshed out and improved so damn much. Hopefully I don't butcher the pronunciation of his name, but Junya Ishizaki has done a fantastic job. I absolutely adore the combat in this game. And for anyone worried by the fact that Hidetaka Miyazaki didn't direct Nightreign, he did give it the green light and was involved heavily in the concept phase. And just in case it wasn't obvious, this is a standalone game. This isn't a DLC. This isn't Elden Ring 2. So you don't need to own or even have played the first one or the DLC to be able to jump straight into Nightreign. This is for everyone. It's a complete standalone experience, and I highly recommend it. And with that, my friends, all that's left for me to say is thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.